Ladies and gentlemen, please take a seat. The opening plenary of the World Financial and Passenger Symposium is about to start.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage, Master of Ceremony for the Joint World Financial and Passenger Symposium Opening Plenary, Yannick Hoyles, Director Distribution, IATA.
Wow, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for that warm welcome. I'm just the MC, so please do a lot better for our speakers. They're way more important than I am. But really welcome everybody to this conference. The theme is about value creation, unlock the potential. That's what these 2 days are going to be about. It's really great to see all of you here. There are some we see quite frequently every year, which is fantastic that you're coming back. And to all those for whom it's the first time to this symposium, welcome. You're no doubt here because you saw the agenda was attractive, but we're going to demonstrate to you that by the time you leave tomorrow afternoon, you will not regret that. You will leave enabled with ideas, tools, networks, directions to go forward in this journey to value creation and unlocking its potential. Now, we've been working for the last 3 days, actually since Sunday. We've had industry meetings with our airline members and some other partners. And over these 4 days, there have been 1,143 delegates registered. Quite impressive. In this room, I think there are 2 empty seats. So there are 852 seats. So there are 200 seats. That's 850 people in this room. So it's fantastic. And one reason why that's fantastic is because it means that networking is going to be fantastic, just as good as the content. And we know that you come here for the networking as well. Couple more numbers. Actually, just one more number. Over these 2 days, there are 107 airlines represented. That's quite good, huh? That's about bringing our industry together and taking it forward. Other people in the audience, you'll recognize yourselves through technology providers, airport representatives, ground handlers, financial institutions, government regulators, travel agents, and corporate buyers. So it's a great mix, the whole end-to-end value chain. But you can see here, if we didn't have sponsors, we couldn't do this networking. So a big thank you to JL Technologies for the welcome reception last night. Can you give them a little round of applause, or a big round of applause? Keep going. I'd like you to thank American Express for sponsoring this opening plenary, please. And we have many more sponsors, which are going to come on the screen in 1 second. And here we go. See, a lot of people are here to support you. I'd just like to mention our 2 airline sponsors, TAP Air Portugal and United Airlines. Round of applause, please. Our 2 prime sponsors, Excelia and Sabre. Quick round of applause, please, for Excelia Sabre. And our platinum sponsors, Amadeus and Visa. Round of applause, please. I'm not going to go through all of the others individually, rest assured, but they're as important. So please give a big round of applause for our gold, our silver, and our media partners as well who are here today. Please. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I need you to do a little bit of work, teeny bit of work. Okay? Thank you. I say that not for me or for the speakers, but for those whose phone rings. It's very embarrassing. Another thing you can do, if you want to connect to the Wi-Fi, I know it's a major area of focus for a lot of you when you come to a conference. It's all here. And finally, if you want to download the app, you can rate the sessions one after the other as we go along. So that's it in terms of setting the scene. But before we move to our first welcome addresses, there's one very, very important item that we need to be very, very conscious of, and that's competition guidelines. And to that effect, I'd like to ask Daniel Cantor, our Assistant Director of Legal Services, to come on stage just to say very, very few words. Daniel, please.
Thank you, Yannick, for always warming up the crowd. Distinguished guests, welcome to Chicago. I would like to draw your attention to the IATA competition law guidelines. These guidelines are on the tables as well as on the app. Please familiarize yourself with these guidelines. As always, it's critical that you act consistently with the guidelines during formal sessions today, during coffee breaks, lunch, networking dinner, etc. You've seen the highlights in the guidelines, the kind of stuff that will get you in jail here in America: bid rigging, market allocation, price fixing. But antitrust violations are rarely that binary, that black and white. And in the land of social media, the slightest accidental step or slip of the tongue can land us in a world of trouble with costly investigations. Just as an example, a few years ago at an event in Miami, there were press statements done unilaterally by some airline CEOs. And they talked about capacity. And that was it. The need to manage capacity. And overnight, there were 150 lawsuits filed. just because of those unilateral statements. So please be mindful and respect our guidelines in your Twitter feeds or X feeds, as well as other social media postings, and importantly also during question and answer sessions throughout this week. If I do cut off a conversation, it's to keep everybody safe. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say a couple of words about the Chicago Convention, given that we're here. It's the single most important document for civil aviation, and it happens to be the very first world's or global standard, if you will. The convention was the work of diplomats representing some 52 countries and signed here in Chicago in December 1944. And that first very important global standard happened in the middle of World War II. And I thought about that this week, and of course relevant with what's happening geopolitically. So back then, even as World War II was raging on, these far-sighted delegates from countries all over, they recognized that civil aviation would, and I quote, help to create and preserve friendships and understanding among the nations and peoples of the world, end quote. Those words from the preamble of the convention demonstrate the importance that governments attached to international travel. And even as the world was at war, they knew that it wasn't merely about transportation. Aviation across borders had a much higher purpose. Now, of course, IATA was created a mere 3 months after the Chicago Convention was signed. And ever since, and in an ever-growing tent, IATA, its member airlines, non-members, agents, GDSs, corporate buyers, TMCs, OTAs, aggregators, and countless others are in the business of standardization, of ensuring interoperability. And through these interoperable industry standards, we create an environment that incentivizes and drives innovation, which ultimately leads to new products and services that creates a better customer experience for all of your customers. All of this will be displayed in the next 2 days. And I suspect, in fact, I'm certain, that the delegates of the Chicago Convention would be very proud to see the progress on display this week and what you are achieving together as an industry. Now, with those few cautionary remarks on the antitrust side, a little bit of history lesson, I wish you all a very successful 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have 4 guest speakers who are going to give you a welcome address, and I'm really delighted to introduce our first speaker, Willie Walsh, Director General, IATA. Please, for Willie.
Thank you, Yannick, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be in this great city of Chicago. And on behalf of IATA, I'd like to express our gratitude to our co-host Airlines United and TAP Portugal, whose chairman and CEO, Luis Rodriguez, is with us here today. Now, I know Scott Kirby would have liked to have been with us, but unfortunately he has another engagement, so we will hear from him in a video greeting shortly. I'd also like to add my thanks to JR Technologies for hosting the welcome reception last night. Thank you very much for that. Now, it's great to see that the US market is leading the post-pandemic demand recovery, and US airlines are also ahead in returning to financial health. So it's fitting that we should be discussing the rebuilding of financial sustainability and meeting the challenges that come with growing demand for air travel. Today, we will be releasing the results of the annual Global Passenger Survey. And I'm not going to go into the numbers because they're going to be presented to you shortly. But I will note that after a very difficult 2022, passenger satisfaction has improved this year as airlines have worked hard to rebuild their workforces to meet the soaring demand. And we know our customers want a seamless journey, and we are committed to delivering on that. However, we rely on infrastructure providers to help us meet those customer expectations. And sadly, on too many occasions this year, we were let down, particularly by air navigation service providers. Staffing shortages and equipment failures at ATC centres, as well as controller strikes, have negatively impacted on our operations and the travel experience of our customers. These service breakdowns illustrate the need for a major rethink of the current and prospective passenger rights regimes to ensure that all stakeholders are accountable for their failures that lead to service disruptions. And today, as you know, it is only the airlines who bear that responsibility, and that is clearly very unfair. We also recognize that existing infrastructure constraints will not be solved overnight, if indeed they are to be addressed at all. And with rising passenger numbers, we need to find new ways to minimize queuing at airports and to take out the repetitious and redundant identity checks that take time and resources and impact on our ability to deliver the experience our passengers want. Partly that involves trying to remove as many processes off airport as possible, but it also means embracing digital technology and biometrics in the travel chain. And today we will be demonstrating the first digital end-to-end airline journey from travel shopping to arrival at destination using digital verifiable credentials and biometric identification. We will also be looking at the other side of the coin, achieving and maintaining financial sustainability while meeting our social and environmental obligations. Now, I'm looking forward to some very interesting discussions over the next 2 days. And before I hand back to Yannick, I'd like to say a special thank you to all our sponsors and exhibitors and encourage you all to visit them during the breaks. So it's great to see you all here. I look forward to meeting many of you over the next day or two, and I hope you enjoy the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Willie. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the beautiful city of Chicago. So as the next welcome address, could you not do better than having John Robertson, the Chief Operating Officer of City of Chicago? Can you please give John a very, very warm welcome?
Good morning. I usually don't get walk-up music when I give speeches, but I appreciate that. They told me that my remarks are to be brief, so I only have 100 pages for you this morning, and I will promise to get through that very quickly. I want to first of all welcome you on behalf of Mayor Brandon Johnson. Again, my name is John Robertson. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the City of Chicago. And I want to thank IATA for your invitation this morning. I also want to welcome you on behalf of our Department of Aviation and the entire City of Chicago. I'm thrilled to welcome you here to the first ever World Finance Symposium and World Passenger Symposium. As you all know, this incredible event brings together several areas of air transportation like airline retailing, finance, and the passenger experience to create a dynamic platform for strategic exploration, actionable insights, and transformative information. This gathering is incredibly valuable to the travel and tourism industry overall, particularly the destinations that you all serve. Your collective work over the next several days will shape the future of air service and contribute to the vitality of not only this great city, but cities big and small across the globe. Thank you to the IATA staff for organizing this event and all your work. I know that it is no small feat to pull this off. I definitely want to thank all of you for traveling to Chicago and hope that your experience in our airport was a pleasant one. Before you get into your sessions, let me just tell you a little bit about Chicago and our aviation system. It's a particular privilege for me in that almost 20 years ago, I was the Commissioner of Aviation of the City of Chicago, overseeing O'Hare and Midway airports. So this is very much like a homecoming for me. Our Department of Aviation is an agency of the City of Chicago that is responsible for overseeing both O'Hare and Midway airports. Our Department of Aviation is hyper-focused on growing both the economic impact of our airports and Chicago's connectivity to the world. We do this by providing safe and efficient facilities, excellent passenger services and amenities, and economic opportunities to diverse firms of all sizes. To remain a global leader, we are continuously investing in our terminal facilities, our airfields, and the expansion of access to other airports. And it's all paid off. In 2023, the U.S. Official Airport Guide named O'Hare as the most connected airport in the United States and 10th most connected in the world. With over 260 total destinations and more than 1,800 daily direct flights nationally and internationally, O'Hare was the second busiest airport worldwide in aircraft operations in 2022, with close to 700,000 takeoffs and landings. And with a passenger volume of at least 68.3 million annual passengers, O'Hare ranked fourth in both the U.S. and the world. But we don't end there. Midway is also critical to the national and international air traffic network. Many people don't realize that Midway is among the top 30 airports in America, similar in size to Tampa International, Nashville, Washington Dulles, and others. Last year, Midway saw over 20 million passengers offering service to 95 total destinations and more than 420 daily arrivals and departures. Now, we know that during the pandemic, our employments fell off, but we are excited about the rebound that the aviation industry and our two airports in particular are experiencing. Our airports are constantly evolving and growing alongside our airline partners with more gates, new technologies, modern amenities, and significantly better passenger experience, all thanks to our capital investments. This includes our O'Hare 21, our multi-billion-dollar, multi-phased program that we're doing to expand our capacity at O'Hare, our recently unveiled Terminal 5 expansion as part of a $1.3 billion in projects at this terminal for this decade, a $7.1 billion terminal area plan, which includes construction of the O'Hare Global Terminal, 2 new satellite concourses, taxiways, runway rehabilitations, facility upgrades, and other airport projects. Throughout the pandemic, we have worked with our airline partners to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to make sure that O'Hare and our airport system is effective and efficient. And that means making sure that we are running our airport like a business, like many of you do. We remain incredibly focused on meeting the future travel demand, increasing options for our passengers, and supporting economic development through job creation. All of you are on the leading edge of the air travel industry, so there is much to gain from this gathering. Your presence here reinforces Chicago's status as an aviation capital, and the recent milestones at our airport, along with ongoing infrastructure improvements and beautification efforts throughout our city, makes us very proud to be able to host this event today. They wrote a lot. So I'm going to end it this way because I know that you have a lot of work to do and you're anxious to get started. So I just want to take this opportunity again to welcome you to our great city. I hope that you enjoy the facilities that we have here at McCormick Place. And on behalf of our mayor, and in using his phrase, I simply want to welcome you to the greatest frickin' city in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. I'd like to introduce and also to thank our co-host airline, TAP Air Portugal, and therefore I'm introducing Luis Rodriguez, who's the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of TAP Air Portugal. Can you please give Luis Rodriguez a very, very warm round of applause, please? Thank you very much, Luis.
Good morning and thank you. My dear industry colleagues, it's an honor to be here. I would like to thank first the greatest freaking city in the US, Chicago. We had a lovely day yesterday going out and had some pizzas. Thank you for that. I would like to thank IATA and United for having us here this morning as well. About 3 years ago, we were on the verge of total failure, going down. You would not bet we would be here today. However, the effort that all my colleagues at TAP and all our stakeholders from all levels took to prevent that from happening was unbelievable. And today we're celebrating a new dawn. We're celebrating the work of many people who brought us here. We now set out internally to build one of the most attractive airlines in the world, attractive to our people, to our passengers, and to our investors. And we're doing that. Yesterday, we published the first 9 months results and Q3 results, and we achieved record-breaking performance for both periods, which is great. And a few days ago, before that, we launched a new brand positioning, TAP Embrace the World. Now, TAP is a relatively small company and a minor actor in the global landscape. We got about 100 aircraft. But we would love to see the world moving our direction, embrace each other. This is more, being here is a powerful motivator for us and a proof of life. We want to move forward and we want to bring everybody that we can alongside with us. The future, as we know, is full of challenges. But if there's anything we've learned in the past few years is that no one will sort it out alone or hiding from the world. Seek out for help and work collaboratively. This applies to the top corporate level and to the individual down in every organization. So we are here and we are willing to work cooperatively with everybody. It's an honor to be here, and thank you very much for having us, and have a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Scott Kirby, and as Woody Walsh said a few minutes ago, unfortunately Scott could not make it here today. However, he was very, very keen to send you all a message, and the message is a recorded video that is going to come on now.
Hi, I'm Scott Kirby. It's my pleasure as the CEO of United's hometown airline to welcome you to this great city. I know we're going to spend the next few days talking about passengers, financials, and all the issues that are impacting aviation around the globe today. But I want to take just a minute in the intro to tell you how important all of you are to the global community. What we do in aviation is special. And while we compete with each other around the globe, our ability to unite people and connect the world really is critical in today's global environment and in a world where there's challenges everywhere. I think one of the casualties of COVID was actually the loss of global connectivity and perspective that happened when we weren't traveling. So it's important that we take our role seriously of connecting people and uniting the world and helping build those bridges around the globe. Of course, we should do it sustainably. It's important that we figure out a way to do it, but we really should be proud of the role that we play in making the globe a better place, and we are working hard to make sure we can do it and do it sustainably. Welcome to Chicago, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Scott. So our next session is going to be, I would say, one of the very important sessions I know you will look forward to, because it really gives you an idea of some of all the forces around us and where they're heading from an economic point of view. So I'm really delighted to introduce my colleague, Andrew Matters, who's Director of Policy and Economics. Please give Andrew a very warm round of applause.
Thank you very much, Yannick. Good morning, everyone. It's fantastic to be with you, and it's fantastic to see a full house here today as well. Before we talk a little bit about the developments and the outlook for our industry, I think it's helpful to start with the big picture macroeconomic backdrop, because we know that the business cycle and what's happening in that global level feeds down into the air transport demand, both on the passenger side and, of course, on the air cargo side. So the first chart that I have for you today is looking at global GDP growth. The blue bars on this chart are the global aggregates, and you can see in the green and the red lines, we've got the growth rates for the emerging markets and for the so-called advanced economies. If we focus on the blue bars to start with, you can see the very strong rebound in GDP growth that we saw immediately following the pandemic in 2021. We had growth of 6.5% GDP worldwide that year. Now, obviously, that level of growth, that rate of growth is not sustainable. So in 2022, that growth rate slowed. It came back to around 3.5%. For this year, the latest IMF forecasts have growth coming in at around 3%. So when we try to put that into some sort of context, a 3% growth rate is not that far off a long-run average growth rate for the global economy. So 3%, not too hot, not too cold, somewhere in the middle there. On the IMF's forecasts, that 3% growth rate is probably going to be the same next year as well. What's really interesting when we look at splitting that global growth rate out, you can see that there's a very big difference on the chart between the two lines, between the green line and the red line. Green line, the emerging and developing economies are expected to grow at a pace of around 4%, considerably above the global average and very much above what we expect to see in the so-called advanced economies growth rate. Those advanced economies growth is down at around 1.5% this year, which is a little bit lower than we would typically anticipate. And once again, both of those growth rates are expected to be broadly maintained in 2024 as well. If we dig down at a more disaggregated level and look at it at a country level, these are again the IMF's latest forecasts that were released last week. The key to understanding this chart is green is good. The green colour depicts a positive rate of economic growth, positive GDP growth at the country level for next year. These are all for 2024. And the darker the shade of green, the better. Darker shade of green means a faster growth rate. And so you can see, consistent with the chart that we had before, there's a lot of the darker green colours in Africa, through the Indian subcontinent, over into Asia Pacific, and there's also a few patches in Latin America as well, right? So these are a lot of the emerging and developing countries. So this story hangs together, of course, at the country level, as we saw on the previous slide. Now, one of the things that has been very important in helping us to understand the pace of the recovery that we've seen in air transport since the pandemic has been what's happening in the labour market. So if we just focus on the left-hand chart here initially, this is looking at the unemployment rate across a range of countries, both advanced economies, some emerging, key emerging economies as well. We've taken this chart back to 2000 because I think it's important to understand the perspective here. Unemployment rates globally are very low. In a number of countries, they're at record low levels or have recently been at record low levels. And you can really see that in most of the countries shown here, that's certainly the case. Unemployment rates are low. Now, that's been great news for air transport demand because if people have jobs, they have income. And if they have income, they're going to be buying stuff, which helps our air cargo industry, and they're also going to have the disposable income available to purchase air travel, passenger travel. So that's been really good. Now, what the downside of those very low unemployment rates is what it means for labour and skill shortages. So labour markets are tight. Finding labour, finding the right sort of labour has proven to be a bit of a challenge. Not just for airlines, but other parts of the value chain as well. In some cases, that's also adding upwards pressure to wages growth and labour costs. So we're seeing this in airlines, we're seeing it at the airport, we're seeing it in air traffic control as well. So this is a broader problem, and of course it's not just limited to aviation. One of the other defining macroeconomic factors for last year was the sharp spike that we saw in inflation. So this is the right-hand chart on the slide today. The good news about inflation is inflation has peaked. The inflation rate is slowly coming down. So inflation has peaked, but when we look at that rate of inflation at 4.6% currently, that's still uncomfortably high for some of the central bankers around the world. And when inflation gets high and starts to worry central bankers, their response is to put interest rates up. So we've seen a lot of interest rate increases. Indeed, the bulk of the interest rate increases is behind us, but we still think, given where inflation is now even though it's well off from that peak, we think there's probably a little bit more to come in interest rate increases around the world. We can't think about the big picture, the context for our industry without thinking about what's happening with oil prices. Oil prices and jet fuel prices are a key cost to the industry. Normally that's around 20 to 25% of total operating costs. We estimate that last year fuel costs accounted for around 30% of airline operating costs. So it's significant. You can see the big spike that we saw following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This was a defining element for our industry last year. The good news is that both oil and jet fuel prices came back and they troughed. They bottomed out in April or May of this year, back at levels that had existed prior to the invasion. Since that time, however, we've seen oil prices starting to drift higher. Jet fuel prices have followed them, and what you can see when you look at the difference between those two lines, that's the jet fuel crack spread. The crack spread is represented by the red bars on this chart. You can see that the crack spread has also increased. So oil prices are higher, that crack spread has widened, which means that jet fuel prices have increased even further than what we would expect just from the oil price rise. And the other factor that's also coming into play is that the US dollar is also appreciating at the moment. Now, part of that has to do with the safe haven flows associated with developments in the Middle East, but we're seeing the US dollar going up as well. So for non-US airlines, given that a couple of the key cost components, mainly oil and fuel costs and also aircraft purchase costs and leasing costs, are denominated in US dollars, whenever the US dollar goes up, that's an additional cost impost for most airlines. So there's kind of a triple whammy at play here at the moment. Oil prices are going higher, crack spreads going higher, US dollar is going higher. I guess the positive is that the US dollar is not as high as it was last year, but you can see it's headed back in that direction. So that's the big picture. That's the global macro backdrop. Let's have a look at what's been happening in our industry specifically. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this chart. I thought I'd get another run out of it because we're not going to be using it for much longer, because what this chart shows is the recovery in the industry compared with where we were in 2019. It depicts both cargo volumes and passenger volumes, and we split passenger volumes, RPKs in this case, out into their domestic and international components. What you can see, if we focus on the blue line, which is the domestic RPKs to start with, you can see that domestic RPKs are currently almost 10% higher than where we were pre-COVID. So the domestic markets have recovered in terms of volumes. So that's a real positive. Not quite so positive when we look at what's happening in the red line, which is the international RPKs. Certainly we can see a very clear upwards trend, a very clear recovery that's working its way through there. But international RPKs are still down around 11% compared with where they were in pre-COVID. And of course, that means that total RPKs, total passenger volumes, are still about 4% lower than pre-COVID. The experience with the cargo market, which is the green line on this chart, shows a very different profile, right? And we all know that cargo volumes were very strong through the pandemic. Then we went through a period where those volumes started to normalise. We had volumes falling. We think at the moment we've probably seen a floor that's been put in place in those volumes. We've started to see a tentative recovery come into play there. The upshot of all of that in terms of cargo volumes is that we're very close to where we were in 2019, down around 1.5%. If we think about this recovery at a regional level, and we're focusing here on just the international travel markets, you can see that with the exception of the green line, most regions recovered broadly in line with one another. Of course, there are various regional differences that we see there. They don't move in lockstep. But broadly speaking, the recovery in all regions except Asia-Pacific, the green line, has been fairly steady. With Asia-Pacific, we know that the travel restrictions that were put in place in countries in that regions were generally more stringent than were applied elsewhere, and they were also held in place for longer. So what we're seeing now that the Asia-Pacific countries have reopened their travel markets completely, what we're seeing now is that Asia-Pac, that green line, is catching up. Right? We're seeing convergence across all of these regions. So that's a very positive development, and one that's going to continue to play out over the period ahead. We've heard a couple of times this morning already about the importance of connectivity, and this is really a value that our industry brings globally. We've heard a little bit about what's happening with the Chicago airports in particular. This is what connectivity looks like at the global level. You can see here we've split out domestic and international connectivity in the blue lines and the red lines. Similar kind of story to what we've already spoken about, right? That domestic air connectivity is pretty much back to where we were in that pre-COVID period, but the international connectivity is lagging a little bit. And if we were to dig down into what's behind these numbers, there are two key elements to connectivity. The first one is the number of unique city pairs, kind of the breadth of the network. That's one thing. And the breadth of the network has recovered reasonably well. In fact, if you look at the domestic networks, they're actually bigger now than what we had pre-COVID. The other part is the frequency of flights on those networks. So we can think of this as the depth, if you like. So breadth is doing pretty well. The depth, the frequency of flights is still lagging. So there's still a way to go there in terms of building out the networks that we have in place. So where does all of this leave us in terms of the recovery and getting back to 2019 levels? And here we're looking at annual totals. What we're trying to depict here is the recovery. We're trying to get back to 100. 100 is the 2019 level. You can see that with the exception of Asia-Pacific, all of the regions, passenger markets, get back to their 2019 levels this year. Asia-Pacific takes a little bit longer to get there. We think that's going to get there next year in 2024. And given the size of the Asia-Pacific market, what that does, it holds down the global recovery. So the global recovery gets very close this year. It may go either way, but at the moment, we've got that global recovery coming back in 2024 as a consequence of what has happened in Asia-Pac. So that's the recovery in traffic. Lots of good news to talk about, but also some interesting stories when we dig down at the regional level and compare international versus domestic. Where does that leave us in terms of financial performance? So the financial performance, a little bit like the traffic performance, has recovered very strongly. Back in 2020, our industry lost almost $140 billion. Just 3 years later, we think the industry is going to be back in the black. We think that the industry is going to generate a net post-tax profit this year of almost $10 billion. That's quite a remarkable turnaround. We often talk about the resilience of the air transport industry and the way our industry comes together to adjust and to adapt to the shocks that come its way. I think this is a very positive example of exactly that. So around $10 billion worth of profit this year. Sounds like a pretty good outcome, sounds like a big number. It's not a bad outcome, absolutely. But when we put that in terms of per passenger profitability, you can see that we've still got a very slim margin. So this comes out at around $2.25 net profit per passenger. So absolutely a fantastic financial turnaround, but in this context, we can see that we haven't yet got back to a sustainable financial position in the industry, as is very much a high volume, low margin business currently. Just $2.25 net profit per passenger. A couple of interesting issues that have arisen recently, and we often get questioned about this, and I'm sure you're receiving questions as well. We hear a lot about how the airlines have increased airfares and how they're taking advantage of the pent-up demand that passengers have to travel. This tries to put that situation into a little bit of context. Here we're using global average airfares. Again, we've taken this back to kind of the pre-COVID. So when we look at airfares, it's the red line that we're focused on. And you can certainly see that after a significant loss, a significant decline rather than loss, sorry, of around 40%, airfares have indeed recovered. And we've gotten back above the level of 2019. So at the moment, nominal airfares are about 16% higher at the global level than where they were prior to COVID. But what's really important to note here is what's been going on in that blue line. The blue line is inflation. So inflation over the same period has also been rising. And it's almost 25% higher than where we started from. What that means is that over the period, real airfares have actually declined by about 4%. So yes, nominal airfares are higher, but once you take into account what's been happening with inflation, that real airfare is actually lower now than where we were pre-COVID. One more issue that we really can't avoid, although if we can't click it over, we will avoid it. Here we are. Geopolitical risk has increasingly become an issue, right? Certainly in light of events in recent weeks in the Middle East, this has really come into attention. This chart of geopolitical risk that I'm showing doesn't incorporate that. It's a monthly chart, so we haven't yet got this month's data in there, and we would expect that geopolitical risk on this chart is going to spike up once again as a consequence of what has happened recently. But what's interesting is that before the Middle East situation changed, the level of geopolitical risk currently is actually at a higher level than what we would historically expect, than the historical average, right? So it's not just what's happening in the Middle East, it's not just what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, it's not just the geopolitical tensions that are bubbling away between China and the US, it's not just what's happening, the tensions in the South and East China Seas, right? It's all of these things. So there has been a shift globally in terms of geopolitical risk. And this is one of the things that we're keeping a very close eye on, because this has both direct and indirect implications for our industry. So if you think about some of the indirect implications, this would be around world trade. This would be around implications for supply chains, for example. Implications for oil prices also come into this as well. So geopolitical risk is a key risk that we're focused on at the moment, particularly as we sit down to prepare our forecasts for next year, which we'll be releasing in December. Of course, geopolitical risk is not the only risk that the airlines face. I'm not going to run through the list that we've put together for you here. We've tried to group these in terms of direct risks to the industry and some of the more indirect risks. We're going to make these slides available, as we always do. This might be an interesting one for you to take away, for you to focus on, for you to think about exactly how some of these risks might impact your particular business operations going forward. The one key point that I would make when it comes to risks is that we should always remember that it's not just downside risks that we need to think about. The downside risks are usually the ones that we care the most about because they have the largest impact on our business. But we shouldn't forget, just as there are downside risks, there are also upside risks to our forecasts as well. And it's worth spending a little bit of time to think about those. So on that note, I'm very pleased to...
I think, Andrew, yeah, we have, you asked me, or you suggested if we had a few minutes for questions. We do have a few minutes for questions. So we can probably take a couple of questions from the audience, if there are any questions, of course, and as long as Andrew gives us some relatively short answers to these questions. But I think it'd be great if anyone's got anything on their mind they'd like to ask. We have a couple of mics. Feel free to raise your hand. If there's no one, that just demonstrates, Andrew, it was a fantastic presentation, very, very clear. Round of applause for Andrew, please. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to move into what our passengers, what our customers feel and think and say to us. I like to mention customer centricity. In IATA, we're all focused on the customer. Because if you don't focus on the customer, like all of you in this room, particularly our airline members, there's no value creation, there's no potential to unlock. And I'd now like to welcome on stage someone who's immensely passionate about the customer and talks about it with great passion. And I'd like to welcome Nick Kareen, our Senior Vice President, Operations, Safety and Security. Nick, to come and give us an overview of what difference.
Thank you very much, Yannick. Andrew, typical hard act to follow. Good morning, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be given the next few minutes to provide you with some of the highlights from the Global Passenger Survey. And before I get started, why it is such a pleasure. So I'm from the fringes of North America in this small place on the far east coast of Canada called Newfoundland and Labrador. Hey, not alone in the room. That doesn't happen very often. Aviation was so far from reality in my upbringing. So much so that I never got on an airplane until I was 21 years old. I never managed to get a job in this industry till I was 26, but I've been lucky enough to work in it ever since. We were that far out there, my father used to say when we were growing up, we're not at the end of the world, but you can see it from there. So when I get an opportunity to speak in front of a group of people like this, I'm incredibly grateful and incredibly humbled and also slightly nervous. So please bear with me as I go through the next few slides. So, as I go through the slides, I'd like to ask you to do something. Most of this won't be a surprise to you at all, actually. And one thing I would like all of you to reflect on is to think about these touch points. Think about your experiences. Everybody in this room probably works for or alongside the industry, but we're also customers. So when you see these numbers, just think about it for a second in terms of how you see it, and provide some more insight, perhaps, as we go through. Challenge yourself to think about some of the points, and don't fall into the trap of simply saying, that's the way it is. As I was writing these notes, I was thinking about it. I'm lucky enough to participate in a lot of industry meetings and gatherings like this, and I find myself asking a simple question often, actually, why? And I often get the response back, because. And I immediately think of an experiment that has resonated with me over the years about the 5 monkeys in a cage. Any of you familiar with that experiment? So the experimenter took 5 monkeys and he put them in a cage. And he put a ladder in the middle of that cage and he put bananas at the top of the cage. Surely at the beginning, the monkeys started to climb up the ladder. They reached to try to get to the bananas. But the experimenter would spray them with icy cold water. So before long, anyone that made a move for that ladder was attacked. It became a social norm for the 5 monkeys not to reach those bananas. Once that became the social norm, one by one, the experimenter replaced the monkeys, up until the point where none of the original monkeys were in the cage anymore. But none of those monkeys would go for those bananas, but they couldn't tell you why. So let's keep that into perspective. And I'm pretty sure you will see plenty of examples as I go through these numbers of because. So before I start focusing on some of the touch points, I think it's important to look at this slide I have behind us, and Willie mentioned it as well earlier. The simple fact is 82% of people are satisfied with our services. That's pretty high. So despite all of what is said about us, the push for passenger bill of rights, whether that's in the US, in Europe, in Canada, the fact of the matter is we do a pretty good job, which says a lot when a lot of the shortcomings in this business are out of our control. So, the survey focuses on basically the touch points, from booking to destination. And again, as I go through this, think about your experiences and your experiences of these different touch points along the way. Easy to see where we've invested in touch points, where we've introduced automation, where we've embraced self-service, we perform well. Booking, travel options, arrival at the airport, check-in, all these things are performing at a level that one would expect. Where we struggle, and I'll get more into this later, bag drop, baggage, security, transfer, customs, and baggage claim. And anyone in this room that has waited for a bag would know exactly why that's the lowest number. The underlying theme in everything that the customers have been telling us for the 7 years we've been doing this survey, but more in particular in this one, is they're looking for something. They're looking for 2 things: convenience and speed. And that really shouldn't surprise any of us, because that's pretty much what we want in our daily lives. Restaurants, shopping, drive-throughs. You ever sit in a drive-through and get frustrated because you've been there 4 minutes and expected to be there 2? Wi-Fi. I'm pre-internet, and I am actually experienced dial-up. Can you imagine what the people's expectations would be if dial-up was the only thing available? So it's not surprising that this is what customers are looking for. So we started to look at each individual process during the journey to see what the customers are saying about them and how potentially we could make them better. So when it comes to planning a trip, the biggest delighter, 84% are happy with, is the booking process, which is good. And it should be, because if that's not easy and seamless and a pleasurable experience, then we wouldn't be here, actually. So that's good. But there are still things that they're looking for, and we can always strive to be better. Having all the information of their travel in one spot, I can see that being a reasonable expectation. And with the advent of unbundling and additional fees, clarity on what's included in the price, sort of the fine print, seems reasonable and easily attained. Continuing on the planning side, we look at payment. And for the most part, people are happy with that too. But there is significant variation. And if you look at this regionally on the slide, you can see that. And not every region is the same in terms of their choices or preferences when it comes to making payments, and there's some pretty good reasons for that. So when you get deeper into payments, and we start to ask ourselves what the customer actually wants, 38% don't like the lack of payment flexibility, in particular when it comes to split payments. A quarter say that they don't buy extra or additional services because of it. And in the end, what the customers are asking for is payments to be easier, tailored payment options, split payments, and transparency on fees. Pretty simple. I always find this interesting because when I ask myself that question, I would say my answer would be price. But our customers don't see it that way. So when it comes to selecting your flights, proximity is the most important, then followed by the price, and then followed by the airline. Obviously, there's a lot of variability in that, and if you live next to O'Hare, you probably have a different view on this, but in general, proximity counts. Another key component of the planning process is immigration. The variation that exists is a mess. And quite frankly, e-visa is the only way to go. It's actually, at the moment, because it's such a mess, become a hindrance to travel. 36% of our customers suggest it's discouraging them to travel. Why? Because it's too complex, said by 49% of the respondents. This is another area that requires more advocacy, more focus. The growth in visa requirements isn't questionable, but if governments are going to go in this direction, make it easier. Lastly, on the travel planning side, the vast majority of customers are prepared to provide whatever info is necessary to speed up the customs process. Surprise, surprise. We've done a significant amount of innovation and automation on the customs side. But when you think about it, I come from a time when you sit on an airplane and you fill out the form and you walk off the airplane and you queue up and you hand in your piece of paper and somebody looks at it and they stamp it or they tick it or they put a letter on it and away you go. What we've done is take that manual process and digitize it. We haven't changed anything. We haven't leaned anything out. So this is a process that is ripe for opportunity in terms of how we manage information and how we can use that automation to our advantage. And as mentioned about the visa, 2/3 want online visa. If this is going to be a requirement, then let's move forward in terms of embracing an e-visa structure around the world, which is happening, but not at the pace it needs to. So then when we talk about speed, and this is where rubber hits the road, so to speak, airport processes. Speed is the name of the game, and ironically, we've become anything but that. What's clear is customers feel they have purchased a ticket to go somewhere, not to go hang out at the mall. It's fascinating how airports have transformed over the last 20 years, designed to create dwell time and to capitalize on it. But if we could fulfill the customer's wishes, that would hurt that business, but actually give them what they want. And in terms of areas that they'd like us to focus on, a large percentage, 55%, want to know more about fast-track options. 2/3 are frustrated by the queues and security. And 91% support the growth of trusted traveler programs. These are no-brainers. We just aren't there, simply are not there yet. So let's talk about queuing for a little bit. Customers don't like it. There's certain aspects they like less than others. And on the slide it's indicated 41% don't like buses. Not really sure how we would find a solution to that, although we could probably be better at managing those buses, but at the meantime, they don't like it. 39% don't like queuing on the bridge, the old on-time performance game. I started boarding, it was the flight attendant. So queuing people up in the bridge, waiting for the flight attendants because they're just not ready yet. They haven't done their checks, they haven't put away the catering, whatever reason, so you can't board. I don't blame them. I don't like it either. I'm probably sure I'm not alone in this room. 39% don't like queuing at security. Well, I think that should actually be higher than that. We need to lean out processes. We need to find better ways to reach that seamless, frictionless travel that our customers want so dearly and that we would actually benefit from as an industry. Continuing on with airport processes, more and more non-airport, off-airport processes are being requested or desirous. Willie mentioned that as well. Immigration information in advance, what a concept. Check-in, bag drop, bag check. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. All these can be implemented relatively quickly, but we lack a willing dance partner and someone willing to change regulations in order to enable it. I found this slide the most fascinating and most revealing of all. It's a stark contrast to reality. Just let the numbers sink in for a second. You are traveling, you only have a carry-on. 74% of customers feel that in that situation, 30 minutes should be sufficient to go through the airport. You got a carry-on and a check bag, 45 minutes should be enough. If you have all the carry-on and a check bag and also require special assistance, 93% feel that less than an hour should be enough. Guess what? Anyone that's traveled in this room today, the day before, or a few days previous, your recommendation to be at the airport is, depending on where you're going to, 3, 4 hours in advance. That is so far off what the customer expects. Yesterday, I traveled from Montreal, so I said I would do the same thing I was asking you. Think about your travel experiences as you're looking at these touch points. So in Canada, in Montreal, you have to go through security, and then you have to go through pre-clearance. It took me an hour and 90 minutes to get through both. And I was there early because I expected that. And I looked at my boarding card for shits and giggles, and the boarding card said, yes, they wanted you there 3 hours in advance, but the cutoff time was still an hour prior to departure. It is absolutely impossible to make that happen in an hour. So our cutoff times are what the customers are asking for, but in reality, we can't deliver it. So I think this is something that we need to start focusing on and how we can close the gap to get back to where we used to be, because it used to be this way. A domestic flight 30 minutes prior to departure was the norm, not anymore. On a bright note, there is help, or there is opportunity. And we're finishing off on the airport processes. Let's talk about an enabler. And again, Willie mentioned this in his opening remarks. Something that will actually help airlines and their customers deliver on the expectations. Digital identity and biometrics is the biggest opportunity we have. It's already out there, but it's out there in pockets. Board on a certain flight, or check in on a certain airline, or maybe use it for customs. Sometimes they take your picture, you don't know why they're doing it, but it's out there. 75% want to use it They want to get rid of the boarding card. They want to get rid of the passport. Me too, please. And 85% of folks have used it, who have used it, actually liked it. Imagine. It is a no-brainer. This needs to be the highest priority. The technology already exists. The standards are mostly in place, and there's only one person or people standing in the way. Governments need to lean in on this. Can't speak about it without at least identifying that while we do that, we need to make sure that we take into consideration the concerns. But this is not unlike anything that we do now online. These concerns are the same that we would have with Facebook. Data breaches, data sharing, data storage, data deletion. We believe that, as written in the standards, we are taking care of that, and anything that would be developed would have this in mind. Security by design. Now, I could spend the rest of the day on this area. It's probably one of the ones I know more than most, and it's, of course, it's an opportunity. It's the biggest opportunity from a customer satisfaction perspective. It's a major source of dissatisfaction. And since COVID, it's been in the limelight. So we got not bad. When I first had an opportunity to run an airport, it was our PAWABs, our passengers arriving without bags, and the process itself was, you know, in the double digits per thousand, unsustainable. We started to fix that, and we started to get better at it, and delivery times were improving, and matching people with their bags got better and better and better. And all airlines pretty much followed the same suit. But then COVID hit, and then with all the reasons behind staffing and everything else, this has reared its ugly head in a way that far exceeds pre-COVID levels. So customers are looking at options. They want it to improve. They want options. 67% like the idea of pickup and home delivery. Well, they're getting home delivery in some cases now, but just happen to be days after. But 67% are looking at this as a viable option. Now, this has been around for a decade or more. I think it's time for us to really reevaluate that. 39% want to see the connection process more streamlined. Now, this is getting better, but again, inconsistent. Not having to pick up their bag is one example, and rechecking it. The Holy Grail. This is where it is. Tracking. Let's decipher what the customer is telling us. Real-time tracking would increase confidence by 57%. 87% would be willing to check a bag if they could track it. Okay, I'm willing to guess a good 80% of the people in this room travel to be here. How many people checked the bag? Wow. Why? Why didn't you check a bag? We need to fix this. Confidence is waned. It's not waning, it's waned. Improving in this area, increasing consumer confidence could actually improve ancillary revenue, but also significant side benefits. It would reduce queuing time and security. There's less bags to screen. It would help with the boarding process, which can be a dog's breakfast. It also could help, especially on narrow-body aircraft, some of the Tetris that takes place on a daily basis when we're flying. The benefits are obvious. Now, with the increase in advent of the use of air tags, the disruption is here, but it's in the hands of the consumer. So this is a major priority for the industry to figure out and act upon. Lastly, worth noting that all of this the growing number of customers, which I shouldn't have switched slides, actually interested in electronic bag tags. Now, this is one that's been around, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 years. 20 years, people have been talking about the advent of, hey, why don't we use electronic tags? Baggage manufacturers have been waiting for a decade and are interested in doing it. The technology already exists, but for some reason we haven't been able to get there. Perhaps sustainability will be the push. So back when we first did some analysis on this, and I can't remember, it was probably 2015, somewhere around then, but the estimate was there were 3 billion bag tags the industry would produce in a run of a year. Those 3 billion bag tags could circumnavigate the Earth 39 times. It's a lot of paper, a lot of plastic paper. So maybe, just maybe, that will be part of the catalyst as we move forward to start to embrace tracking technology and electronic bag tags, which, by the way, could do both. So there's plenty of upside, there's lots of opportunity, but we just need to start acting on it. So, and accessibility, last but not least. This is a very critical area we need to spend more time on and continue to focus on. But the good news is that by and large, 80% of those that requested special handling felt their service requests were met. That's an improvement year over year, which says a lot considering some of the challenges we've had in this area. So that's a good thing. It means that we're finally taking notice or trying to improve our delivery there. But like anything, there's always clear areas that they would like to see more us to continue to focus on. Website enhancements, primarily for ease of booking, and better communication in the services that are available. Always communication, there's never a survey without communication being a fundamental part of it. So it's a critical part of our service offering, and it's good to see that we're actually heading in the right direction on this, with obviously still work to come. So, as I stated at the top, think about these touch points as you have. Don't just accept it don't accept it because of the way it is or just the way it's always been. Identify areas to improve, offer suggestions, let people know, especially politicians. Let them know it's important. Aviation is so many things to society today, and we've heard it this morning. It enables trillions in global trade. It enables billions to travel, reunite with family and friends, attend those special events. It breaks down barriers. It enlightens perspective. It moves life-saving equipment, drugs, even organs. Yet for some reason, governments, politicians choose to marginalize, over-regulate, and stifle innovation. We absolutely must find a way to break that paradigm, not only for the customer, but to allow this industry to thrive and flourish and not remain as the government's cash cow and convenient diversion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for a bit of networking. I really hope you enjoyed the first part of the morning. Thank you very much to Hit It, our sponsor for the break. The media who have been invited to the media briefing, it's in room E265, just downstairs. See you in 45 minutes. Thank you.